Welcome to another edition of Influence Today with Chet Tart and Terry Lyles. Hey, I'm glad you're back, Terry. You've been traveling all over the place, plus you're promoting your new book in
Yes, becoming invaluable.
Becoming Invaluable. I leave the becoming off all the
It's
time.
okay
Just
because you
need.
already are invaluable. So you don't have to become. You are it. So no, thank you. Yeah, it's been a busy week or two just traveling, just doing a book tour physically and virtually like this. So really glad to be back with you with our podcast. And we're always looking forward to exciting guests that we have another one today that we can share more of knowledge and impact and influence on people's lives. So
I think today's guest is exciting because of the topic. The topic is important, but not easy. And as I talk to more and more companies, they seem to like, oh, yeah, I got it. I got it. Janie Smith is with us. Welcome. Janie, it used to be a Vistage chair, became a Vistage speaker, and now a speaker all over the country, and wrote a great book called Creating Competitive Advantage. Janie,
mhm.
welcome. Glad you're here.
Thank you, Chet. Glad to be here.
So let's go back a little bit. So you were a Vistage chair and then you became a speaker. What changed? How did that happen? Could you give us a little background into that?
Well, first, let me start with the fact that the first half of my career was in in Fortune 500 companies, big companies. And when I became a Vistage chair, I literally did not even know what a mid-market company was because I came from the corporate world in New York City. So I started meeting these folks, these leaders of mid-market, mostly B2B. And after a short time with them, I started asking them, what's your competitive advantage? And I got such garbage answers over and over and over. So I've got this phrase I always ask them is your message at risk of dying from 1,000 cliches? Because too many people are talking about their businesses and trying to differentiate with cliche phrases. It doesn't cut it. We live in very different times right now. People don't have time to wade through blah, blah, blah. Lots of what we call fluff. We get a lot of TMI, but tells us nothing. So I devised a process over the years, and I experimented on Vistage members. And I asked them, what's your number one competitive edge? Took them through a process and uncovered scores of differentiators they didn't know they had and they weren't using. So it was through that process I had case study after case study until finally one day I kept on my little yellow pad, my to-do list, write the damn book, like Terry's successfully done.
Yes.
So I finally did, and it became a bestseller for many, many years. It's loaded with case studies. It takes this notion of competitive advantage and makes it user-friendly. I don't know about you, but I'm not very academically inclined. I could not read Michael Porter's book on competitive advantage. It's mind-numbing to people like me, and most entrepreneurs want it so they can understand it, swallow it, and use it. And so that's what creating competitive advantage was designed for.
Is competitive advantage good for individuals as well as businesses?
Absolutely. Too few of us know how to position ourselves based on what we have done. People in resumes, I see people do a pretty good job of it, but what is often not done, and I tell businesses this and I tell individuals this, past performance is the best indicator of future performance. So what have you done in the past? And I don't mean your accolades, I mean specific quantifiable results. That's what we tell businesses, and people need to be able to demonstrate that as well.
This is a powerful conversation because I think everyone needs to know about competitive advantage. What are the common flaws, or what are businesses doing that they think they have a competitive advantage?
Yeah, so what I tell people is they go through the good old trusty SWOT analysis, strengths,
Yeah.
weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and they mistakenly think that their strengths are competitive advantages. Look, when I do a Vistage talk or a keynote, I ask the audience, what's your number one competitive advantage? And I get answers like good customer service, or people, quality, innovation, trust, relationship. blah, blah, blah. Everybody says that. Those are table stakes. Those are givens. I'm not doing business with you unless I think you have those things. So, the number one thing is either they don't have a competitive advantage, but my experience is most do, they just don't know them. And if they know them, they don't sell them. We find scores of things in companies and we ask their team, are you saying this in a sales encounter? Is this even on your website? And more often than not, they go, wow, we should be using that. So there are many, many things that businesses are not talking about. I always say, don't take for granted that which is taken for granted. My favorite example of that is we worked with an oil and gas logistics company. And safety, you're transporting oil and gas. Of course, safety is important. And they had all the cliches, we have proper training, our people, blah, all the blah, blah, blah stuff that everybody who talks about safety has. Turned out they had 6 or 7 very specific, quantifiable statements, up to and including none of our clients in the last 15 years have suffered a loss due to anything our trucking has done. So there are so many things that companies take for granted that they're just not talking about.
Yeah, and I think an important part is, we as human operators, navigators, if you will. I train fighter pilots and race car drivers and executives, and it's all about how are you navigating, as an individual. And I think a competitive advantage is we as the person, who we are. How do we develop ourselves from a mind-body capacity to be that go-to person if they think of supply chain, if they think of psychology, if they think of, gas and oil, whatever they're thinking of, your name comes up because they're like, I met this person that was invaluable. There was something about them. So in your book, I think, that's a very powerful piece of, like you say, it's not just window dressing, it's not fluff. It's the individual is the navigator that I think gives us that quality.
It may be when we're talking about individuals, but when we're talking about a company or an organization, it's a lot of individuals. And the connecting the dots that I always encourage folks to do is make sure that the individuals that are responsible for the customer's top values, make sure they know it. I'll give you an example. One company in Pennsylvania we worked with, it was a steel company, preformed steel. And we went through the double-blind market research, meaning their customers didn't know who was asking, what's your top buying criteria? We come back with 20 tested attributes and we say to the company, okay, guys, what do you think came in 1, 2, and 3? And the most important values of customers, not just yours, but because we interviewed prospects, people that don't buy from them. They didn't know who was asking. And not one person on their executive team or sales team guessed the top buying criteria. It was accuracy and completeness of documentation. I can't do anything with that steel I just bought from you if the documentation's screwed up. So going back to your point, Terry, about the individual, you make sure everybody in the documentation department understands that's the #1 buying criteria for anybody buying our prefab steel. And so the individuals have to connect the dots between the operational excellence that is required in their job, and not that a lot of times that doesn't happen in a company.
Yeah, I simplify that to what I consider I, we, and it. The I is the individual, the we are the teams, the it is the organization. And there has to be synergies between technologies and people. And I think what you said is very powerful, that you could be off by 100 miles and think you're right on point, and you're not, because you didn't ask the right question.
Yeah, well, when we've done the research, like I've said, and it's in the book, we've tested now about 300 companies. We've done double-blind market research. We come back, we ask them to guess, as I just described. 90% of businesses do not know their customers' top 3 buying criteria. So if 90% don't know what they should focus on operationally, they're missing the boat. There's a big gap of disconnect between where we should have operational perfection and hence our marketing and sales messaging.
How do they find out their buying criteria from their customers? What is the best way to do that?
Well, it's just, the simple answer is ask the customer. We like the, what we call the gold standard is the double blind. Double blind means the customer doesn't know who's asking, and the company who's commissioned the research doesn't get to know what individuals said. You have to reassure the respondents, this is all confidential. You remove price from the equation that way. You'd be surprised. It's not about price. We prove that over and over again. And we'll ask a number of questions, but we will typically test about 20 buying attributes, asking the customers to rate them on a 1 to 10 scale. And that's where we find out where they are. And what is really stunning is not only do 90% of businesses not guess the top 3, but sometimes they'll guess something that came in 18, 19, or 20. And they think the ones at the bottom that the customer doesn't value, they think is most important. And that's pretty scary.
When I ran businesses, I found it incredibly hard to know what my competitive advantage is. We talked about it for weeks and months. Why do you think we're blind to it?
Well, I can't see the forest through the trees. It's easy to do it, for someone else. And we're looking under the wrong rocks. That's what I like to say. When we go in and do our workshop, we're turning over a lot of rocks. We're asking the team to think in areas where they haven't before, about their own jobs, about the expectations and deliverables. What are all the deliverables that matter to the customer? Again, the things we take for granted, it's too easy to not see them on a day-to-day basis. And so we prime the pump, we give them several rocks to look under, and then they're like pleasantly surprised. It's like an Easter egg hunt. Who knew we had all this? So it's there. It just needs some discipline in looking.
So when you find out your competitive advantage, how do you use it? Do you use it on your web page? Do you use it in your elevator pitch? Do you change the way you communicate with people? Do you put it in advertising?
The simple answer, Chet, is yes. All of the above. All of the above, and consistently. What we really get upset about is we go to a client's website, then we tell them to send us their marketing material, or then we go on social media, and guess what? All different messages, same company, all different messages. So, and then not only that, when we do the survey in a company, we say to the team, what do you think came in 1, 2, and 3? And we're asking, let's say 16 senior executives. Guess what? We get 16 different answers. So if internally you have no agreement about what's most important, what does the marketplace think? How do the outside people regard your company when internally you don't even know what your competitive advantage is or what consistent message you're sending? Consistency is another hard thing for them to get. So your answer is yes, all of those things, but consistently.
Here's a thought that you brought up. I'm a middle market, small market business. It sounds like to do this market research, it's quite expensive. So if I can't afford that, is there a way to find out besides just asking our customers? Because then we're exposed.
Yes, absolutely. So chapter 9 of my second book, Relevant Selling, gives a number of inexpensive ways to do it with the pros and cons. There's always SurveyMonkey. Ask somebody outside of your firm to do it so that it doesn't look like it's coming from you. Get a college intern who's studying market research or marketing, and they'll probably do it for free for the project. So there are ways to get it done, but by all means, ask the customer, because when you're guessing, my favorite quote is 90% of information, it's Peter Drucker, 90% of information used inside of organizations is internally focused. That's exactly backwards. 90%, that you get in your conference rooms, you huddle together, your team goes, yeah, I think that's right. Yeah, let's go with that pitch. And they didn't ask the customer. So that internal focus where you keep reaffirming the wrong thing is how companies get into this wrong message.
Let's do a message thing. Terry, you are now speaking to Vistage members. Before you got into it, did you have any idea what Vistage was all about?
Not a clue.
And when you got into it, was the message clear enough?
It was to me, meaning my perception, and I think this is what we're talking some about is perception reality. So 90% of reality is perception. So my perception when I first saw Vistage was these are business leaders that are trying to, collaborate and network and better themselves and train themselves to be better as leaders, hold themselves accountable. And I have found that to be true. So my perception after I got involved was correct that these people meet together almost like a chosen board group, that says, hey, we're going to come in, we have a safe place. We're going to talk about what's working, what's not working in our businesses. How can we help each other better that to become more valuable and, more influential in our business places? And I think that's, kind of what we're talking about now is like, how do you create that synergy with people in ourselves as well as others?
So Vistage has 3 sentences: better leaders, better decisions, better results. Would you
Yep.
agree that's what you got out of it?
Absolutely. Yep. And I didn't know that getting in, but yes, I do. And it was by osmosis because and not only do I speak and I leave, I speak and sometimes I stay and then, we do a debrief. And so I've learned a lot about Vistage just by being in the same room as an example. And I think that is part of the power of understanding that we're all in similar situations. We just need to ask the right questions and expect similar things, but be willing to be coachable and accountable to what other people are saying.
So Janie, I'm a Vistage chair. I use those 3 sentences. Do you think people understand what Vistage is?
No, those 3 things are, their tagline. Taglines don't communicate. So when you say to me better leaders, my first question is what makes them better? How do you know they're better? Vistage has the wonderful line, and I forget if it's 5 times, they grow at 5 times the industry.
Yes. Yeah.
That to me is the powerful statement. I wouldn't go with better leaders, better, because better is subjective. And how are you going to prove it to me? The proof is in that 5 times growth sentence, and that's what I would lead with. We did a few years ago, I did a lot of speaking in the UK for Vistage, and we actually did the double-blind market research for Vistage UK when it was a separate entity. And it was interesting because we interviewed the members over there. I don't have the results in front of me, but there were a few surprises about what people valued at the front end when they know nothing. And it wasn't what you think it is. It's not what you think it is when you're selling it. Chet, you and I are going to talk some more about this offline. And I think that there's tremendous opportunity with being able to value it even more because it's so valuable. And I'm not sure the message gets across all the time.
Can I ask you this question that for businesses that are listening that can't afford the research, how would you guide them into starting this? What are some of the processes a leader in a company should take so that everyone, including the subordinates, leaders, managers, buy into this and also participate?
All right, well, while it sounds self-serving, I
Yes.
think they should buy the book. And I'll tell you why. Let me tell you why. Number one, I make about 50%. I had the big publisher, Random House, so they take all the money.
This
My
is the book
agent
here.
takes the rest of the money. My co-author's widow takes some of the money. So I make, if I'm lucky, 50 cents a book at this point. So it's not really self-serving. The point is the book was written as a how-to. At the end of every chapter, there are exercises. I've had people call me from all over saying, oh, I read the book. We did this internally, and they'll send me. I had a guy in Croatia, believe it or not. My book was translated in over there, foreign rights bought. Guy owned a taxi company. He read the book. He sent me his list of competitive advantages. It was so cute. He said, well, what do you think? I gave him a couple of ideas. He said, perfect, thank you. If you come to Croatia, you get free taxis.
Like, no, I'm good. I'm good. Let's video conference. It's easier. Yeah, it's all good.
It was really wonderful. But the book really makes it easy for most people creating competitive advantage. And course, the second one, this talks a lot about the research. Whoops, I can't get it in.
Just get it in your face. It'll be fine right there.
There you go.
So the two of them are how-to books with exercise at the end of the chapters. Small, medium-sized companies should be able to do it from this. They give examples, and the books are loaded with case studies. In fact, book 1, Creating Competitive Advantages, most of those case studies were Vistage members because that was who I had to be my guinea pigs. And so those were Vistage company examples.
If I
So
read,
the
Go ahead.
advantage, what is,
Go ahead.
I'm just curious, what is the most important advantage to an individual, an organization, a team? What would that be? What is their advantage?
I don't
Like,
understand.
how do you help them identify that advantage in themselves?
In a company, we go in, we put the team together and we do a full day workshop with a number of exercises to prime the pump. We show them different ways to turn over the rocks and come up with statements. We have flip chart paper all over the wall. Then we start drilling down with what they said. And it's just amazing how much comes out at the end of the day.
So to your point earlier, it's not just a cliche, it's actually work. You have to get in there and unpack it and start digging down and figuring out where the pearl is in the midst of all of this, and then accentuate that. Because I agree with you. I think that's where a lot of people miss it. What they're thinking is not what other people think of them. It's that
Well, one of the
perception.
things we're not talking about here, which is critically important, is it must be measured. We do not let our clients say anything that we cannot validate with their metrics. We will have them send us spreadsheets. We do Excel pivot tables to prove it. We had one client, quality came in number 1. We said, what's your quality? Well, we don't know. What's your return rate? They sent us 150 codes of returns. We said, what are we supposed to do with that? So we worked on getting those codes down to something manageable to find out that in a category that they could handle, there was less than a 1% complaint rate about issues, but it took a lot of validation in massaging the numbers. So it's not just about saying, you know, we're better at this. It's about proving it with your metrics. 98% on-time delivery for the past 3 years. And here's how we did it. And boom, boom, boom with metrics.
Very good.
Great. You need to get the book, Terry. I think it's just phenomenal.
I look forward to it.
Before we leave, would you, is there a question I didn't ask or one nugget you want to share that's incredibly powerful that I may have missed?
Well, it's that notion that if you don't value it, your customers won't either. And so that's why the metrics are so important. If we're going to talk about how much time we've saved you, how much money we've saved you, how much we've improved your quality, how we maintain the supply chain for you, we need to put a dollar sign on it and show you, because if you don't value what you do for the customer, they won't value it either. And that's our goal, to find those places that are not being talked about and not giving you the opportunity to get away from price as the differentiator. Most businesses are commodities. How do you get out of commodities? Our view, this is how.
Well,
Thank you, Janie. I appreciate it a lot. This has been an eye-opener and a great conversation. Terry?
yes, I love it. Yeah, it's great stuff. Look forward to getting the book, reading it. And, you know, our advantage is what we can add into ourselves and others, right? That's what the word could mean, advantage. So I love the conversation. Thank you so much.
Good. Thank you. Thanks, Terry.
So if somebody wants to get in touch with you, Janie, how do they do that? What's the best way?
Jay Smith, that's a tough name to remember. Jay Smith at smartadvantage.com can contact me directly, or smartadvantage.com website, or janiesmith.com website for speaking and engagements.
That's great. Hey, thank you for being on the show today. I appreciate that a lot. And thank you for listening to Influence Today with Chet Tart and Terry Lyles. And if you like the show, please hit like, please share, and please come back next week because we have another special guest. Thanks for listening to Influence Today.